I want to start, I think, picking up where Anne left off, where she was talking about the victims of the massacre at sea. I don't think there's really any other word for it. If we could all just stand and have a moment of silence for the victims. Thank you. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I'm not here tonight to take names for the next flotilla. If you're interested in going, we certainly welcome participation from everybody who's interested in joining. You'll have to go to our website, freegaza.org or listagaza.com. We don't yet have that set up, but in the future we will, and certainly we would love to see greater participation from Americans, United States citizens from this country. Even I've already heard talk from some people about possibly organizing a quote-unquote American ship. I think that would, or maybe ships. So don't ask me if you can get a seat, because truly, although I am an organizer and I'm very much involved, when it comes to getting a seat on the boat, I'm the last person to talk to, actually. Other people do that. The second thing I'm also not going to talk about tonight, and really don't even want to, I mean, you can ask questions, feel free to ask questions, but honestly, this is not about Hamas. It's not about any of the Palestinian factions, for that matter. It's about Palestinians. It's about the people who live in the Palestinian territories. It's about them, and quite frankly, I think I can speak from some amount of experience that these leadership parties, these factions that everybody wants to talk about in the media and among the governments and all that, are so irrelevant to people's lives today that we really shouldn't waste our time too much talking about them. So, if you're wondering, that's my kind of disclaimer. I've spent enough time in the last week trying to deal with questions about Hamas and this and that, and I'm not their spokesman. I'm happy to take the question if somebody insists, but let's try to focus on what we really should be focusing on, at least I think so. So what did we do this week, or last week? And what have we been doing since August 2008? There's still some who think that what we were doing was trying to deliver humanitarian aid. And indeed, we were trying to deliver humanitarian aid, but not only humanitarian aid. We were also trying to deliver reconstruction material. We were trying to deliver paper for school books, textbooks. In a broad conceptualization of humanitarian aid, sure. I think that all of these things consist of humanitarian aid. But we were very much intentionally taking a political act by challenging the blockade itself. Not so much to just simply challenge it and be stopped, but to challenge it and break it. The point was to actually arrive in Gaza, despite the media and the propaganda about us, that we were just seeking a provocation. No, we would have been perfectly happy for the Israelis to sail aside, move away, when we arrive in Gaza, and come and go, and come and go, and come and go, and open Gaza to the world. Give Palestinians what they need the most, which is not medicine or wheelchairs or cement, but freedom. So that is the basic thing that they are denied, their basic human right that they are denied. While they have a right to medicine and food and all these things, and these things should not be kept from them, we need to keep in mind that this political act that we took was a response to the political act that Israel takes by making the blockade in the first place. It is Israel that has established that humanitarian aid is political by virtue of the blockade. And even before that, for 40 years, since 1967, it is the political act of the occupation that we also must challenge if we are going to seek to enable Palestinians to live free. And we need to remember that the blockade, the policies against Gaza, against Palestinians in Gaza, while the blockade itself is just a few years old, they are built upon a foundation of occupation that is now over 40 years old. And that is the root of the problem at this point that we need to dismantle in order to start moving towards freedom for Palestinians. So we took this political act, and we weren't using humanitarian aid. I want to make this clear, we weren't using humanitarian aid as a cover. It's Israel that's used humanitarian aid as a cover for its policies of blockade and siege and occupation. Ours was a response. And so in doing so, we forced the world to stand up and take notice. Now I also want to be clear, because I think this is an important point, that as we act in solidarity and we act to raise consciousness and awareness, I think this is a form almost of self-criticism to some extent, but I think it's something that's important to remember. That most likely tonight we would not be here, or at least not as many of us would be here. I certainly wouldn't have been on as much media this last week and a half as I have been, and perhaps nobody would have even bothered to pay attention had Israel just simply boarded the boats and not killed 9 people and not injured over 50. It's quite possible, because we've had other missions. We've had other missions that have been taken over. I was on a boat, I was boarded, I was dragged off to prison for 10 days, and aside from a few more left-wing progressive kind of outlets, we were largely ignored. And had Israel chosen to take that method again to stop all of the ships, most likely we would have largely been ignored. Unfortunately, there's a very sharp lesson that can be drawn from this, that the Palestinians have been drawing for quite a while, which is that it's only when violence is used that people sit up and pay attention, giving sort of credence to the old journalistic, mantra, if it bleeds, it leads. And as much as we like to deny that, as much as that offends our consciousness in a way, unfortunately, in some ways, it proves to be true over and over and over. And so we need to constantly call that out. We need to constantly remind ourselves that while we do need to respond to the emergency, that when there isn't an emergency, it doesn't mean that there isn't a crisis going on. And that doesn't demand our attention and response as well. And we're all, I speak not from standing above and looking down, I stand from a position of equality in this. But we did change the world this week, I have to say. In part thanks to Israel's brutal response. But we did. And we did not only because of what happened to us as my colleagues were victimized and massacred, but because we were prepared. And it's funny because this time we were prepared better than ever, as Anne was mentioning. We had the satellite hookup so people could see it live. People were prepared on the ships for the boarding. We were prepared with media spokespeople around the world. I've heard this described as if we are somehow undermining the institutions, how they normally work. That somehow we figured out how to have spokespeople. And that this is somehow, I don't know what's the word for it, we're undermining the foundation of everything, right? Yes, we had spokespeople. I was here in the United States, in New York, ready to speak out and give voice, because we had to combat what we knew would be the official propaganda coming out. We were prepared for it. We were prepared ahead of time. We had all kinds of scenarios worked out in advance and knew what everybody would be doing. And while it sounds and looks to some extent like a well-oiled machine, it was also fairly chaotic on our end. But we still managed to get out our version. We still managed to get out raw, unedited footage. We still managed to get out the perspectives and witnesses of people who saw what happened, report firsthand. I was on the phone with Buena, my wife, minutes before her ship was taken, and as she had already started witnessing what was happening to the Mavi Marmara, and was able to repeat that in the media. And this, in a sense, is a victory. It's a victory of preparation. It's a victory of being able to beat the Israelis at their own game. And we have to keep doing that. And we have to keep up the urgency in doing so. Tomorrow, one of the other survivors from the ship, Yara Lee, who's also an American citizen, is presenting raw footage that she was able to smuggle off the ship and keep throughout detention. Tomorrow at the UN, 4 p.m. If anybody's interested, you can show up. It's an open event. She'll be showing the footage.